Well, hello everyone, and I hope that you and your families are well. Welcome to our spring 2021 Inside the Box lecture series. Because of the health challenges of last year, I decided that our focus should be on designing wellness. These talks focus on designs that promote wellness, practice sustainable strategies, and use the power of nature to improve health and well-being. As I always say, you have the power to change lives for the better through design. The talks you will hear do just that, however, in a more powerful way, as you will see designs for healers and for patients who need healing. You will also witness a specific career path that you may want to consider for your future job or for graduate school. Now, I am delighted to introduce tonight's speaker, Amy Mays. Amy is HDR's Interior Design Director and Associate Vice President leading their New York Interiors studio. As a designer with 20 years of experience, she has dedicated her career to creating award-winning innovative designs. In addition, Amy is the past president of IIDA's New York chapter and is still very involved with the organization. By the way, we have our own 2 IIDA student representatives in the audience tonight. Amy May's specialties, which are many, include pediatric healthcare design, patient-centered design, branded environments, and sustainable healthy interiors. Amy, thank you for speaking to us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Carol. Hello, everybody. I was having some internet connection issues, so hopefully this is going to be successful for us tonight. I just want to take a minute and thank you, Carol, for that very kind introduction. It's always interesting to hear someone else kind of give an intro for you. But as Carol mentioned, I started very early on in my career working in healthcare, and I've really never looked back. It was something that I didn't know I wanted to do, but I took an internship and that was it. I've been doing healthcare for 20 years. So I think tonight I want to talk a little bit about, what healthcare means to me, what it means to the practice, as if you were an interior designer, and then even from the public perspective. So I'll dive into it, and I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a moment. Move that. You cannot see yet, or can you? Not yet.
Not the full screen yet.
We can see your
Okay.
PowerPoint though. Yeah.
You can. Okay, very good. Okay, so let me flip this display. All right. So do I sound okay? Because I'd like to leave my voice on, or my visual on. Otherwise, I'll close it.
You
Sure,
sound
I think
great.
You still, there we go. Perfect.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, very good. So, as Carol mentioned, she thinks that it's the perfect time to talk about this, and it is. And I just want to mention that I've had the opportunity to lecture and critique at other schools in the city. And it's interesting how many students really do have an interest in health and wellness, which is great. I don't think I could say that from 10 years ago. And whether it be from personal experience or just the fact that healthcare design has come a long way, I think it's probably a little bit of both. And schools are doing a really great job of exposing students to not just the practice of design, but all the different market sectors that are out there. So I'll just dive in. So I thought it might make sense to talk a little bit about, what healthcare is out there, what types of projects are there. So I broke it down into just a few categories. It goes much deeper than this, but I'll just hit highlights on these, and then I'm going to use projects to, just as a way to tell stories and explain some of the process and the thinking that goes into healthcare design. So first, we have inpatient care. Inpatient is something that is usually a 24-hour stay. It's an inpatient unit, an inpatient hospital. So going to go in for surgery, there's a lengthy stay. For care it might be some of that. Cancer care can also be outpatient. It's usually a very large building. It includes lots of patient rooms, lots of diagnostic and MRIs, CT, very clinically heavy spaces. And then on the flip side of that, we call the other end of that outpatient. And that's something that would be like a one medical, your local doctor, a dermatologist, something that is on a smaller scale, that is not necessarily tied or directly associated with a hospital. So we work on those vary in scales as well. We do wellness centers. That's also, and that's actually becoming more and more prevalent in the work we do, rather than being kind of reactive with care. We're trying to take a more proactive approach as a society. And I think others probably have done a much better job kind of historically with this perspective than we have in the States. So that's kind of a subsector that we do work in. Dental is one that you might not think of, but that's definitely falls under the healthcare category. And then pediatrics, this is a subsector that I've worked in for many years. Actually, I started my career out in pediatric design, and I focused on that for probably the first 10 or 12 years of my career. And then we have mother baby units that, that's a different type of environment that you design for. You're really shopping for care versus needing surgery or having a procedure done. So it's a very different kind of mindset when you go into thinking about that experience and how you're going to design for someone with that mindset. And then rehabilitation is also a market sector that we have spent a lot of time in, and my firm especially. More recently, we've been doing tons of rehab facilities. There's a huge movement and progression in, advancing care. And so all of these types of projects have their different variations, but obviously the outcome is to provide a positive environment and experience for someone who's, it's not always a pleasant experience like your baby. It's very stressful at times, and there's a lot of anxiety that can come along with experiencing healthcare. So I think for me as a designer, that was something that I was drawn to early on, was that I was providing a really positive impact for individuals versus, work or any other market sector that you could reference. But and I just wanted to take a minute and talk about, when you think about healthcare design, I think people think about those very patient heavy clinical spaces. And it's actually, we get to touch a little bit on everything. There's often retail, there's office and workplace, there's a dining component often in the program. There are lounges, waiting spaces. So I kind of think that we get the best of all the market sectors in underneath the bigger umbrella of healthcare. So I think now I will just go into a few projects I've selected and talk about some of the highlights, some of the elements that might be beneficial to you if you're thinking about, going into healthcare or wellness as a specialized design. So Shirley Ryan Ability is in Chicago. This is a project that was completed a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And you will see as I move through the slides, there's a very strong brand, as Carol mentioned, that resonates through this. the idea of movement and motion was at the top of their priorities as design drivers. Obviously, it's a place for rehab and being able to, actively move again and heal. So they wanted it to be very fluid, very active, lots of movement in the space. We also had the opportunity to do some amazing artwork in this project as well. So, and that happens through other projects as well. But, you can see here, very clean. I think I'll just pause here a little bit. I think clients in healthcare have a different perspective now than they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago about aesthetics. And I think realize that their patients shop for care, and the gift of the World Wide Web and the internet has allowed that that shopping to happen even before you are in the environment. So I've really seen a push on the aesthetics in healthcare in the last I'd say 8 years. So this is the project. It's in downtown Chicago. And you can see here, there's inpatient, there's outpatient. So kind of reflecting on my breakout of the areas at the beginning, there are clinics, for day treatment, and then there's long-term care. So this floor plate is just a typical floor plate. You can see here on the left, there's this multi-story space. I think I have an image, but that was the heart of the facility. So everyone coming together for rehab, and we integrated, a stair open space so people could actually engage with real life scenarios during their period here. So I'll just talk a little bit about healthcare planning since this is on. Program, like any market sector that you work in here, is really fundamental to the success of the project. Patient rooms around the perimeter, they need daylight. It's important for us to heal with daylight and nature and exposure to all of that. So there are guidelines and codes that are around that. And then you can see this active space here at the core of the floor plate. And these are just some images of waiting spaces. I'm sure as you've talked about other sectors, you've talked about, workplace most likely, and the idea to give variety in choice to individuals that are using the space. So this is an outpatient clinicing. And then we have, this is a really good example of, it's healthcare, but there's a huge workplace component to it. And you can see the aesthetics is very consistently drawing through from space to space, very clean, white, crisp lines with soft curves. And then we get into the more kind of clinical space, and you can see there's more color, there's more engagement, there's more kind of energy in the space, right? We want people to be active and be energized and motivated. So, again, those lines come through. This project had a wonderful collaboration with Graphic Opportunities. This project, I think there were probably 5 consultants on this project. I mean, the size that it was really allowed us to develop some really incredible ideas. So that just starts to give you a flavor of inpatient hospital that has a few outpatient components. It varies in scale, it varies in the needs and the diversity of what's required. A lot of custom opportunities in healthcare, I would say. This is all custom work, custom lighting. Oftentimes when you have the scale and the repetition of I'll go back. So say of the patient room, right? I'm working on a hospital now. I'll touch on it a little bit later, but it's 800 beds, which is considerable. It's big. So if we have the opportunity to do something custom, we usually do, so that it's, very unique to them. It reflects their brand, their needs. And we usually have a really good partnership with manufacturers, whether it be millwork or furniture. That's often part of our process. So I'll talk a little bit about Kaiser Permanente. It's an organization on the West Coast. It's a large healthcare system, and this is an outpatient project that I did. And it was one of 5 that we did, and we were asked to rethink the outpatient experience. So rather than going and waiting for your appointment, let's make your time more beneficial and not something that be negative memories. So they have wonderfully warm weather out there. We did, as we were thinking about this, we really collaborated with the owner in a very way, which doesn't always happen. I will say this was an incredible client. We rethought everything. We spent a year thinking about how their clients, that they call them clients, that how they want to experience healthcare. Rather than just providing healthcare to the community, they engaged with the community. We had a number of open houses and walked through large scale mock-ups that we did. Really, I have not, in my 20 years of experience, I've not had the opportunity to work on such a forward shifting idea with a client that we did here. So these were just, we rented a warehouse that was near one of their facilities, and we mocked all this stuff up. We mocked exam rooms up and provider spaces up, in data, technology, all sorts of, from all components. This is a diagram that which maybe you would develop something very similar to this for one of your classes. But we were really looking at efficiency and a model that allowed, from a plug and play perspective. Oftentimes an outpatient building is leased space. So the owner doesn't own it, right? They're just leasing their time there. And so, you need to be efficient and dollar conscious, and how much bang can we get for our buck. So these were just studies that we did. These were full-scale mock-ups that ended up being developed later. And here you can see I put together several IKEA sofas in a weekend. But it was wonderful. We had individuals walk through and experience it and give us real-time feedback, so that we were able to make, and so therefore at the end game, right, we thought it through pretty well. So this is just a really unique example of a project that was actually very exciting for me in my career. These are just a few other images from that project. So community space, they wanted to make sure that this was a place that people could come to, not just for care, but for, open community sessions and lectures. They really engaged with their community, and that's part of their goal, not just on this site, but everywhere, all of their projects. Community is very important to them. It was a collection of outdoor spaces in between these kind of pavilion buildings of wonderful weather. So I'm going to shift a little bit. This is a project that I just completed. We photographed it during COVID. So this was interesting, actually, to the group on the call that does photography. Tess, who is seated, she had her mask off. I wasn't in the photo. She took her mask off. They took the shot. I came in. She moved. I took my mask off. So there was a lot of piecing that went together to make this photo shoot successful. But so this is for a client, NYU, the university, and they have several dental clinics where soon to be dentist practice, and they've really expanded. And this is the fourth project we've done for NYU. The other three were in the city near campus, but this is in the heart of Brooklyn. So if any of you, I forget intersection, but it's the Whole Foods, the Target, it's in that building. So here, you know, aesthetically, they wanted to go for something that was very clean, modern. These are small waiting areas. So rather than a large waiting area, we really wanted to break the scale of these down. I think scale is really important in healthcare, as far as being able to progress through a space and get an individual from point A to their destination with a lot of clear wayfinding, and, you know, try and reduce the stress as much as possible. So these are just some nice clinics. This was this occupies 2 floors of the building that they're in. You get to be models when you go on your photo shoots. But, you know, lighting's really important in healthcare design. We try to have a lot of indirect light that can be controlled. Obviously, in a very clinical setting, it needs to be functional as well. But lighting is really key to a successful space in general, but even more so, I think, in healthcare. So this is the past project before we did the Brooklyn one. This is an incredible project. These are the type of projects that tell me what I do and provide healthcare design. So this was a project, the first of its kind. It's an oral health center for people with disabilities. So as much as we, and you guys probably know this, you're taught about and lectured to ADA, this took it to, you know, 10 degrees all the way to the end. So we needed to accommodate people with disabilities of all sorts, mental, physical. We had calls and meetings with advisory groups that discussed, you know, severity of autism and anxiety for individuals that are coming for dental care. And so there was a lot of research actually done up front for this project, because it was new. It was new not only to us, but new to out there. So it's a small clinic. You can see here on the left, there's the floor plate. It was a renovation versus a new big build. But, you know, you can see the exam rooms, there's some procedure rooms. The idea of this, you know, circular welcome entry point, people can move around that, you know, easily in a wheelchair, and it's just very open and inviting. Color, we thought a lot about color and materiality. If you're kind of on the one end of the autism scale, texture and color and all of that, you know, it's very hypersensitive. So we spent a lot of time doing research on that. I don't ever get an eye mask when I go to the dentist, but I love that idea. Here's a sensory room for individuals who can come in when they're waiting and the anxiety off the charts high. Just a quiet place to come and calm down. And acoustics, you know, we really made sure that this was a safe place if somebody needed to scream and yell as we were, you know, we learned through the process, it was a safe place for them to do that. This is just another view of the procedure area. Again, using really simple graphics, really clear graphics. To me, that's important to integrated, right? If you want to make sure that brand and wayfinding and signage feels very intentional when you're designing, so that it doesn't feel like an afterthought and kind of tacked on. So this, I wanted to talk about this one. I thought this would be another good example that healthcare isn't just healthcare. This is for NYU, for their Department of Population Health, which is basically a group that does research and gathers data and helps NYU project where care is going in the next year. Where maybe very high numbers of diabetic patients live, or can it be related to cancer? There's a ton of research that they do on their day-to-day life. So this is really more of an off setting, but I just wanted to, share that it is beyond kind of the clinical setting that we provide. So, we bring in light and transparency where we can. You can see all the office fronts, which I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about that in your classes. Able to connect daylight into deeper floor plates of this floor plan here. I just wanted to throw it in. I thought that was a good example of a different type of healthcare that you might not necessarily think about. And we use data as much as our client, as an example here, we use data all the time to understand workflows. And as we think about office and how many individuals can fit in a certain square footage, and I think that's all going to start to new language and dialogue as we move through COVID and into the next normal. But we used data on most projects, but usually on workplace to understand people space. So this project, I will say, healthcare, you can work on a project for a very long time before the end results. I think when I first started my career, I think I didn't see, it was a really large project. I think it was 3 years before I saw it complete. So there's positive and negative to that. You learn your mistakes a little later, but hopefully you have a mentor that's, by your side that can help you through that. I try for some of our, our new grads and individuals that are just coming into the industry, I try to make sure they have a nice balance of large scale projects and small scale projects, so that you get and you can see, your completed project. So Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. This is an addition. This is probably close to, it's a $2 billion project. It's to 1 million square feet. It's an addition, but it is a new build addition. This is the one I was referencing earlier. It's about 800 beds. So they have beds. If any of you have, had the opportunity to visit someone in a hospital or have had exposure to that, historically there were 4 beds and 2-bed rooms. So you could be potentially in a room with 2 or 3 individuals. And at least in the States, the practice is really to have single bed rooms, private rooms. There is an incredible study that goes along with the positive effects of being in a room by yourself. You can control your own light, your own sound, your, all that is yours and your family's to control, versus potentially having to share that with someone. So these beds are we call them decant. There are old facilities on the campus that are double and 4-bed rooms. So these are all private rooms in the new addition. So I'll talk a little bit about this diagram. It's basically, we call D&T block. And usually if you think about, it's kind of hard to understand it in the city because our buildings are so condensed and the density is and they're old. Our facilities in New York are old, but if you're from another location, maybe something that's more rural, the bottom of the building is usually this heavier volume that we reference as D&T, which is diagnostic and treatment. And I mentioned that earlier. ORs, CT, MRI, and then your beds are kind of plopped up on top of that on a tower. So a lot of our public space, public amenities are on the lower floors. Interventional, that's also another name for D&T. So all the ORs are on 2 floors. There are about 30 ORs in this building. And then we have patient rooms from floors 10 through 24. It's made up of a mother-baby unit. There's ICU, there's acute care. So it kind of covers the, very low acuity to someone that's coming in for a minor procedure to someone that's very, very ill and could be here for quite a long time, to happy side of healthcare, which most of the time is having a baby. So this project's been going on for about 5 years now. It's in design. It's going to be completed in 2024. And so they are digging the hole for this project right now. So it's an ongoing endeavor of mine. It's like a child. So what we did, we did this for Kaiser. We don't do it on every project. I think it takes a special client who wants to think through the lens this way. So we be really empathetic when we design a space, especially in a healthcare setting, because of the stress and anxiety that comes along with that. So we do these experience maps, these journeys, and we create personas, and we literally walk through every point of that journey in the hospital or whatever setting we're designing for. And we think about their reactions and their emotions and what do they need and what are we not thinking about, right? I think we often think about the spaces that are programmed. So when you get the program, you have X amount of rooms for this and X amount of rooms for that. We don't often think about the spaces that are in between. And I feel like if everyone is in New York, I don't know if everyone is, or if everyone, maybe there's some people outside of the city now, but we often use Starbucks as our spaces in between, right? You would go to Starbucks between classes. I would go there before my meetings. It's that because the city doesn't have a lot of space for us to hang out. So a healthcare setting is very similar, thinking about all the touch points that a visitor or patient might go through. So just a journey that we map. And sometimes we do it amongst ourselves. Sometimes we do it with the client. It just depends. But it's really important for us to think about the emotional side of other than designing, right? We want to make sure that we're capturing space and providing individuals those areas that you might not think of necessarily. So these are just a few images of some of the design drivers for the interiors of this project. Very clean, modern. Lighting was important, as I mentioned. This is an example, public elevators, but wayfinding is incredibly important in healthcare. You often are going to a destination unescorted. So clear wayfinding, and not just signs, but reinforcement of color and landmarking, all of those things that layer into design that I'm sure you guys have been talking about and doing on your projects in a very large setting where you're kind of navigating a new space. It's critical. So, and here, just another, outdoor space. We've got a couple terraces on this project. which they don't have in any of their buildings now. So we're really delighted to provide that for both patients and families and staff. Where you use color, how much you use, that all reinforces wayfinding, and I'm supposed to be in this space. It feels like I'm welcome here and I belong. I just threw in some, some of our image boards that we gather for our clients, so you can see probably what you're being asked of is real. We do it on the everyday as we put presentations together and diagrams and parties. So this is their dining space within the hospital. It'll seat about 500 individuals, so it's a pretty big dining space. Carol, you and I could probably talk about this for a while. And then, we do, visualization of all sorts. Sometimes it's in-house, sometimes it's with professional renderer, but, trying to get the sense of the space across the client. And then as far as the patient room goes, it's really the core. It happens 800 times and you want to get it right. And you want to make sure that there are line of sight from a care perspective. You want to make sure that have views and can control the light and have technology, but can also manage the technology. Personally, I've had my fair share of a couple stays, and you don't always want the TV on, and you might want music on. So having that filter on as you think about the details of these spaces is really critical. And for me, that's what I love, the details of making these spaces successful. How am I doing on time? Okay, so this is another project I'm going to blow through, but again, another large project, but where I think I showed hopefully a mix of that tonight. So this is really a project. This is in Philly for a university hospital, and it's also new beds, about 500 beds, very similar program. I won't necessarily talk about that. I will talk about the design here and the real desired hospitality feel in a healthcare setting. And we worked very hard. This project actually had a very nice budget, which allowed us to do that. This one is under construction. So if we ever wanted to do a field trip, Carol, we could totally do this.
Sounds great.
So yeah, so I'll kind of go through this. This was our mood board, our inspiration board. It changed and morphed over time, but we wanted the warmth of wood. We wanted warmth of warm lighting. We wanted indirect lighting. We wanted the reflection of the city, which has really beautiful architecture, and the views that these patient rooms are going to experience kind of reflects back on the city. So we wanted to make sure we captured all of that in this. So here we have just these are some renderings and storytelling sketches that we have. Again, storytelling is really a huge part of what we do, and whether it's selling it to our client or a community or ourselves, it helps tie everything together and makes all the decisions that we make have a purpose, and there's a why to why we've done something. I'm sorry these are so small. It was just such a nice board to pull in, but so clean lines, you can see, bringing daylight in, the contrast of warm and cool. We wanted this to be timeless. I know that's a very hard word to describe. I know I personally struggle with what that means, but we pulled back on the use of color and used it in a very minimal way. We wanted to kind of use materials the best way we could. So there's natural stones and, very modern wood, timeless feel, terrazzos throughout. These spaces are going to be around for a while, and we want to make sure that they stand the test of time, both from durability, also, visually. It wants to be a place that, feels, when you walk into a museum, there's a timeless feel to that. So we were hoping to achieve that here. Again, just a few more images. Care space in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a patient room. There's, programmatically, there are components that are in every patient room. But families throughout the waiting, you can see here, throughout the corridor, I'm sorry, small areas for families to either talk with caregivers or just step out of the room. Again, wayfinding, really, really critical. We don't want to just have to deal with small signs on the walls. Those are things that, you should embed in your practice and think about, not just what a space looks like, but how you get from A to